Tēnā koutou. Welcome everyone to our first weed biocontrol session on our virtual Biosecurity Bonanza. To start our week, I would like to introduce Robin White. Robin is one of our weed biocontrol technicians responsible for the rearing, release, and monitoring of many biocontrol projects here at Manaki Whenua. Today, Robin will present a cost-effective method to assess the impact of biocontrol agents using nodding thistle as a case study. Anyone from the audience can put their questions in the chat. We will manage the questions at the end of the presentation, and if we run out of time, any unanswered questions will be handled offline so everyone can get a response. This session is being recorded, and all the recordings will be available on our website within the next week. So if anyone would like to connect with our presenter on project ideas or future opportunities, they can also make contact via our website and searching their name. So without further ado, I'll let Robin start her presentation. Up to you, Robin.
Robin White, a weed biocontrol technician at Manaki Whenua. I'm going to discuss our development of a cost-effective monitoring technique and how we applied it to the nodding thistle biocontrol. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues, Ronnie and Simon, and also our funders, the NBC, National Biocontrol Collective, and MPI. So I'm going to cover the background of why and how we developed this assessment method and how it was applied to nodding thistle. I'll also discuss the results and briefly cover the other projects that we've monitored using this method. And then there'll be time at the end for questions and discussion. So councils around New Zealand apply to introduce new biocontrol agents, and they want to follow up about the outcome of these introductions. The Environmental Protection Authority evaluates the applications. At their hearings, questions around the monitoring always come up. So the NBC committed to doing follow-ups of the releases. For an agent that's already introduced, the monitoring doesn't change the risk profile, but it does inform future risk. The issue with the monitoring is that everybody wants it, including us, but the cost can be prohibitively expensive. Often moving on to the next weed target is more of a priority. So luckily we have the power of the National Biocontrol Collective behind us, NBC. This gives us coverage all over New Zealand to monitor biocontrol releases, as it would be too expensive for Manaki Whenua to do alone. The NBC has agreed to check 75% of release sites within 1 year and 50% again within 2 years. And we developed simple protocols, simple methodologies so that biosecurity officers could consistently monitor release sites and have similar results across the country to monitor the site, the agent establishment, the population build-up, and then the impact on the weed. Manaki Whenua then does the more complicated monitoring, such as checking non-target plants for attack, and then doing more intensive studies of some of the projects. We developed a hierarchical approach to this, depending on what stage of release and what stage in the release process the agent is at. Until a step is confirmed, we don't move on to the next one. And this is what that looks like. So there is an order of monitoring to match the stage of the biocontrol's introduction. And this case study is roughly step 4. So because of step 1, we already had data from the time of release about nodding thistle density and land use. And this is data that was collected in the late 80s through to the 90s. Because of step 2 and 3, we already know that the agents are well established all over New Zealand and they've distributed nationally. So this assessment is step 4. assessing the weed population, and then we're also dabbling a little bit in the economics of step 5. Because of the reach of the NBC, we've got power in numbers and can survey large numbers of release sites across New Zealand. We've already got that data from the 80s and 90s from the time of release that gives us a comparison to the present day. This method and approach is unique to New Zealand and only possible because of the NBC. And to our weed biocontrol colleagues around the world, collaborators, we are actually considered world leaders in biocontrol and post-biocontrol monitoring. These are the 2 biocontrol agents that attack nodding thistle. The weevil larvae feed in the crown or the base of the thistle, reducing its vitality. And the gall fly larvae feed in the head, destroying seeds and causing the flower base to turn into a big gall. So this picture shows the 2 adult insects. And on the next slide, there'll be some pictures of the juveniles, which are the larvae, which cause the damage to the plants. So the aim of the surveys was to revisit the sites where these 2 biocontrol agents were released in the late 80s through to the mid-90s. We're particularly interested in how the thistle density has changed since the release. So NBC staff visited these release sites, recorded the density per metre of nodding thistle, and they also made observations about the agent's presence, the seedling prevalence, how the land use might have changed, the thistles in the surrounding area, and other events such as fire or flooding. And here's the larvae of the 2 insects. So if you ever come across nodding thistle in the paddocks, you can, and if you're curious, you can just grab your pocket knife and dig up the roots or cut open the seed head, and hopefully you will find little white larvae. If you'd like to know more about this, have a look at our website. Just Google the 2 names of these agents and it should be the top hit. And we've got fact sheets detailing like what time of year to look and how to spot them. So the second part of this monitoring project was that we interviewed the landowners or managers and asked them about how they managed thistles. We asked them about if the type of management and the cost has changed, and if they have more or fewer thistles of various species than in the past. A large number of sites were checked all over the country. The second visit was important for the nodding thistle surveys to take into account annual variation, the species of weed, the seedling emergence is affected by wet versus dry years. So visiting twice was essential. A lot of work for everyone. Since the agents have distributed widely, we were able to combine the 2 data sets into one. So it gave us a total of 118 sites with 2 visits each and good data that we could work with. The early pre-release surveys showed a mean of 3.1 plants per metre square, and the recent monitoring showed that this had reduced to a mean of 0.65 plants per metre square. So that's nearly an 80% decline in nodding thistle across New Zealand. And we do acknowledge that this is not cause and effect. This is correlational evidence. The power of the survey was numbers, so it's about the quantity, not necessarily the quality. So this change, it could be due to land use or management change, but there also wasn't the same change in Californian thistles. If land use was the cause of the decline in nodding thistle, we would also expect other thistle species to have decreased in density, which it hasn't. Also, the farmers who stopped spraying haven't seen thistles return. If change in management and pesticides had reduced thistle density, they would have come back after people had stopped spraying. So there is still a lot of nodding thistle control, but instead of large-scale spraying, it tends to be spot spraying or grubbing of individual weeds and patches. 25% of sites no longer need any control at all. And you'll see on the graph there that 28 sites had reduced spraying and 4 sites no longer have aerial spraying. So we crunched the numbers and calculated that the annual savings in 2022 dollars would be 28 million a year across New Zealand for biocontrol of nodding thistle. A conservative benefit cost ratio puts it at about 570 to 1. And if we're more generous, we can bump this up to 1,250 to 1, making this one of New Zealand's most successful weed biocontrol programs. So in Simon's talk tomorrow at the same time, he's going to go into more detail about the highs and lows of economic analysis of weed control. So hopefully you can join us again for that. And this is another way of exploring the data. So the dark grey bars are showing the historical data, where a large number of properties had high densities of nodding thistle. And the light green bars are the present day, where the trend has reversed and most properties now have low numbers, low densities. So you can almost see that there was a little bit of a curve there, if we just imagine it, and it's reversed from what it used to be. So you will notice that there are still properties of high density of nodding thistle, and we could speculate a few reasons for this. So it could be environmental, maybe the agent doesn't like, or the insects don't like the environmental conditions at that particular site. It could be from the property managers still spraying. If the managers are destroying the life cycle of the agents, it's not giving them a chance to establish and build up numbers and have effective control. I did wonder about subjective filling out of the form, because such a wide number of people do this. There could be gaps in there on how they evaluate. Therefore, when Manaaki Whenua does do some high intensity monitoring, it is good to fill out gaps in the story. We asked the land managers to describe biocontrol in 3 words, and we get a range of responses. It's always quite insightful, especially connecting between the success of the project and public perception. So it's likely that there's a large lack of appreciation of the benefits of biocontrol. You see there 9 out of 10 farmers who were in the waste of time category still had nodding thistle reduction of up to 90%, or over 90%. We do get lots of enthusiastic responses, but there's still quite a lot of people that don't know or were unaware or were even negative about biocontrol. I think people tend to have short memories and people forget how bad nodding thistle was, and we're seeing the same with ragwort, like they forget how terrible it was, the loss of production, etc. So we need to keep reminding people how bad these weeds were before biocontrol, how high the density was, how much effort and cost that they were sinking into the control, how it was affecting the productivity of their land. You'll see back in 80s and 90s, this old scanned photo, the poor sheepies, you could barely see them over the high density of nodding thistle. Versus now, I personally did some of these surveys of land managers and went to their sites, and they would often say, "Oh yeah, I've got heaps of thistles for you to come and have a look at." And their idea of heaps of thistles was like this, just a few patches around the water trough or the fences or something. So I really want to acknowledge and thank all the council staff for monitoring and managing the original releases, and for organising and carrying out all these recent checks. This was a huge team effort from many people all over the country. And I feel really proud to be a part of the NBC because of all the commitment and engagement I see from you biosecurity officers and other staff. So these photos here aren't exactly from the same sites, but the ones on the left are older ones I found in our records, and the photos on the right are examples of ones that biosecurity officers have sent us more recently. So the pilot for this study was done on ragwort, in which the flea beetle had similar success. The annual benefit from the flea beetle was estimated to be around $41 million a year, and the benefit-cost ratio was also very impressive there. The plume moth was estimated to add another 20 million in benefit each year, but we don't have good data about that. If you'd like to learn more about the ragwort study, have a look on our website and go back to issues 77 and 78 of the Weed Biocontrol newsletter, and that's got some more in-depth figures about that. And then next we looked at the broom gall mite. So the variety of land use types, the high amount of continued spraying, and regional variation made this a far more challenging project to analyse. The release information from the time of release wasn't so good. There were gaps in our database, so it's made it a lot more difficult to analyse. But again, have a look at our June 2024 newsletter, so the last one out, and there's a little bit of discussion about how the analysis of that went. And we are currently looking into Californian thistle and the thistle beetle, which was released in late 2007, and that's still in progress, so stay tuned for results on that in the next couple of years. And it's a lot harder to measure non-economic factors, especially on non-agricultural environmental weeds. So we might be able to put a dollar figure on how much money DOC or a council is saving in weed control, but we're starting to sort of think about these other factors and how do we value the intrinsic factors like the overall benefit to the environment for weed control, or the weed's effect on a taonga species, or maybe how a weed is affecting climate change, things like extra flooding from storms, and how is that affecting people, their mental health, all sorts of things. The access to lakes and how we can use them for recreation. So Simon's going to talk a little bit about this tomorrow, but we are interested in hearing your ideas too, especially some of the cultural ones. So think about this overnight if you need it, or drop us comments or ask questions, and we can have a bit of discussion about other measures of the benefits of weed biocontrol. This photo here, this is Trichosirocalus before biocontrol, and this is after. So from the photos, you can see quite a significant change there. And again, yes, we might be able to measure the decline in weed control if it was happening. But what about the benefit to this walking track recreation, the biodiversity of this area? Trichosirocalus here used to stop the seedlings from growing up through it, but now it's clear, and I've noticed that seedlings are popping back up. This is another a more high intensity monitoring project that's happening at the moment, so there's also a bit of information about that to come in our newsletters and future talks. And this is Chilean flame creeper and old man's beard, just showing the impact of how they can cover the forest and block out sunlight and for some of our taonga species. So I'm now open to questions and comments and discussions. Happy to hear them.
Thank you, Robin. Very nice presentation. Very interesting and indeed to see all those cost-benefit ratio always impressive. Our first question from Trevor. Is there any evidence that insect or mite used in biological control can or will attack any other desirable plant species?
Basically, no.
Yeah.
This is a whole nother talk in itself.
Yeah.
So before introduction, we do host testing of the biocontrol agent. We use a phylogenetic tree to pick related species, especially if they're agriculturally important or culturally important. And we test the biocontrol agent to see if it will attack those other species. We pick biocontrol agents because we want them to be very host specific and only attack the weed that we want them to. And if they are going to cause damage, then we would not release them. There's some occasions where there has been a little bit of predictable attack on non-target species, but they look at the cost-benefit analysis of what the harm the weed is causing versus the harm it might do to the non-target species. For example, the ragwort seed beetle does feed on the gorse seeds, on the gorse flowers when the rag. Sorry, let me start that. The broom flower, the broom seed weevil will attack the gorse flowers, but that's acceptable because it's also a weed.
Gwen here from MRCC, very interested for any further insights you may have about Oldman's beard infestation. So I guess this is a very much work in progress that we may say, with quite a few agents that have been released recently and more to come. So definitely stay tuned, like Robin said, on that. From Sarah O'Connell. Were the farmers who did not have a positive response to the biological control all from a similar part of the country or similar type of farming? Did we see any trend?
No, I don't believe so. It was
Yeah.
pretty consistent results over the entire country.
Okay. A comment from Sarah Jackman. Some species which do well elsewhere can fail in some areas and might give the wrong impression. Yeah, so that's something that you did mention, Robin. So
Yeah,
definitely they
for
are.
nodding
Yeah.
thistle, we
Mhm.
found pretty consistent results across the country. For the gall mite, that could be one of the reasons, but even then, it still seemed very patchy. That they might not like the high rainfall. This is
Mhm.
why we often do try and look into multiple weed biocontrol agents. For example, for Trichosirocalus, it seems like the beetles do quite well in dry areas, whereas the fungus does well in wetter, cooler areas.
Yes, quite true. A comment about Trichosirocalus, by the way. Is the reduction in Trichosirocalus solely down to our biocontrol agents, or are there any other um, means to reduce it? So the picture that you show, was it just biocontrol?
Just biocontrol.
Impressive. A comment from Tia Matchett. The impact on tourism could be used as part of the recreational value in a CBA. So yeah, something to consider as well. All those
Yeah,
places that can't be
absolutely.
accessed.
Exactly. Like we could sort of, I don't know, do surveys about what people think of the landscape view, but yeah, but part of the trick is how do we make this an easy, cost-effective solution as well?
Another question. I think to remember we had a third agent that was released for nodding thistle. That was the receptacle weevil. So how does it fit into that picture?
Yes, correct. So the receptacle weevil was released in 1972. So firstly, that was prior to having this good monitoring system set up. So we don't have information about the density before the receptacle weevil was released. We've got nothing to compare it to. And it also does a similar job to the gall fly, but the gall fly is a much better agent because it has 2 generations per year. So while the receptacle agent probably does have good attack on the first generation of seedlings, and it was commonly found throughout all of these release sites, all these surveys showed that it was everywhere. So it's affecting the first sort of seed set of the nodding thistle, but nodding thistle in New Zealand does flower for quite a long time, so we needed something that would keep attacking it for that long time. But this data that we have, the original data from the 80s, 90s was already about 15 years after receptacles weevil's release, so this is on top of what that weevil might have already been doing.
Right. We'll just wait a few more minutes to see if there are any other questions. I received a text from Hugo saying, "Good presentation, Robin. I think you forgot
Thank you.
I think you forgot a question from Sarah O'Connell. I think I covered this one. Positive response from biological control from similar part of the country or similar type of farming. Yeah, we covered this one. What about the economic figures that you've shown during your presentation? How did you come with such amazing figures?
So we did have to make some educated guesses there, but we looked at the numbers of control cost in the surveys from landowners and then applied them and assumed that, say, 10% of beef and lamb farms in New Zealand would receive some benefit from the biocontrol agents, and then times that out, and it gave that impressive figure. So, we can play with that 10%, even if it was only at 1%, it would still be over 2 million in savings every year. And we took this to the NBC and other stakeholders and had a discussion about it, and they seemed happy with those numbers.
Oh,
I can
very
also
interesting.
elaborate on the first question about the safety of biocontrol agents, is that we also take all this information to the Environmental Protection Agency and they evaluate, so it's not our final decision to release, it is, and the public do get a chance to submit if they're happy or not, and EPA takes everything into consideration.
Yeah,
so far, our track record is pretty good.
A question from Rachel Jones. What density of nutters do you need to be effective to release? Will it be too cold in Southland? So the first question is, what density of nutters do you need to be effective to release?
I'm not sure about the exact density, but it would probably just need to be a patch that was left alone and wasn't controlled so they could go through their life cycle. So maybe in an area of unproductive land. We often recommend to anyone doing biocontrol releases, do pick a spot that's not going to be disturbed by environmental damage or spraying. So yeah, unproductive land's a good idea. And sorry, part two was that Southland. Yes, these agents are in Southland. I did the surveys, some of the repeat surveys down in Southland. We were barely seeing nodding thistle.
Yeah, certainly another place where they have been quite effective, huh?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I know the regional council down there, it is a complete control weed, isn't it? So landowners do have to remove it from their properties. But hopefully the biocontrol agents are just adding to the tool and control it in areas that people can't get to and stop it spreading back into farms.
Another observation from Brendan Gould, it is fascinating that there are such negative perceptions of biological control given the extent of evidence that supports this and the lack of evidence of unintended consequences, particularly given contemporary risk assessment processes.
Yeah, I think it really is the short memories. I've heard stories of farmers coming to field days and bringing a specimen of ragwort that they found on their property going, "What is this?" It's like, oh, you forgot how bad it used to be.
Yeah.
And of course, there's some, really bad examples. I think everyone just thinks of stoats when they think of biological control, and that's what all the public think about. So I think, the NBC members and biosecurity officers do a great job educating the people that they do come across. And, we do have some landowners out there that sing our praises.
That's quite true. All right. Well, I think that we are coming to an end. Thank you very much, Robin. That was a great presentation. And
Thank you for your questions, everyone. Yeah. Thanks for your time.
And we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.